Blog Talk Radio.
No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspective, this is Revenge of the Birds.
Good evening, Arizona Cardinals fans. It is a Tuesday night, and this is Revenge of the Birds Radio. Thanks for having it. I'm your host, Jess Root. And on the line tonight as well, we have Ben and Seth, also from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, coming to you from the desert heat of Arizona and out on the East Coast as well. Tonight we have everybody on the line. So good evening to you guys. How you doing, Ben? How you doing, Seth?
Good. Ready to go?
Good, Jess. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Well, as good as we can feel after a season-opening loss in which things looked pretty good, kind of to start the game, and looked even more promising as we headed towards the fourth quarter, with the Cardinals entering the fourth quarter with an 11-point lead over the St. Louis Rams, up 24-13. Heading into the final quarter, they give up 11 points in the final frame. 11 points to the game's tied. The offense can't move the ball. And then St. Louis goes down the field in the last little bit, and they get a game-winning field goal in the final minute of the game to win the game 27-24, sending the Cardinals to an 0-1 start. And let's talk a little bit about that tonight, guys. In fact, let's look at kind of the stat sheet, because if you look at the stat sheet without having watched the game, you would think, looking at a lot of things, there's a lot of positives to go by. So let's kind of go down some of the things that look good. First of all, Arizona Cardinals offensively, 25 first downs to the Rams 20. They convert on 50% of their third downs, 7-14. Defensively, they held St. Louis on third down, 4 of 11. That's only 36%. They outgained the Rams offensively, 390 to 366. They outgained them rushing. They outgained them in passing. They threw for 2 touchdowns. Larry Fitzgerald had a pair of touchdowns. They scored a defensive touchdown. They also led time of possession, the 31 minutes to 28 minutes. In fact, they scored 3 touchdowns to the Rams 2. Yet you look at the scoreboard, and somehow the Rams end up with 27 points on the scoreboard, and the Cardinals only 24. The Cardinals going scoreless in the first quarter and the fourth quarter, scoring their 24 points all in the middle of the game. In fact, looking as well, they had 70 offensive plays to St. Louis's 62. And if you look at that, you're thinking, that's great. Oh my goodness, thinking about what we had last year, that game looks great. And yet, even still, there are some major concerns. How is it that the Cardinals managed to lose a game where on paper, now granted, yes, they didn't win the turnover battle. They did score the defensive touchdown. They did give up the long sustained drive, and of course they came up a couple of things. They did not log a sack in the game. Sam Bradford had all sorts of time to pass. They let Jared Cook run around the field, pretty much seemingly uncovered. And pass protection was an issue as Carson Palmer was sacked a few times. And so there were some reasons. There's definitely some positives and definitely some negatives. But let's go ahead and talk about it. If we look at the stat sheet again, it looks like the Cardinals should have won the game, just looking on paper. I'm not looking at the score, not watching the game, but some of the key metrics there. You're like, Cardinals win. They didn't. Seth, what do you blame the most, or what do you blame the most for that opening week loss?
What I start with is the secondary, or the coverage on Jared Cook. It's one of the things that I talked about a lot.
I'll cut you off real quick, Seth. You're cutting in and out with your connection.
Okay. Is that a little bit better?
Yes, much better.
All right. Just talking about Jared Cook and what he was able to do. You look at what you look at what this defense has, and what it has is a lot of good things against that they prioritize off season. And I know Darrell Washington's gone, but you have to play with the hand you dealt, and they knew he was going to be gone, I believe, since. And you look at the first 4 games of the season, up against a lot of teams have excellent tight ends, running backs out of and they went and bulked up on the interior at the linebacker, at safety, and kind of placed the blame for week 1 Levi, and rightfully so. He was typical Levi and not very good. But you look at what Jared Cook was able to do, and if the Cardinals points last year, most fans would have expected to win. And to score 24 points and lose this year in the first game, it kind of takes back it starts bringing out the doubts about defense and about being able to get stops, something that we had talked about during the preseason, not giving up a lot of yardage. So that would be my biggest thing.
Now, with you, Ben, if you had to pick something that's most to blame, what would that be for you?
For me, it's all on the coaches, I think, and the schemes on offense and defense. I thought the play calling was problematic on both sides of the ball. The defense is always in the wrong play for a screen or a draw, and I think that's a problem that's carried over from the preseason. They do an okay job creating pressure with the blitz. I know they didn't put up any sacks, but they caused some issues for Bradford. The thing was that they have no answer for quick passes, for check downs, for just the quick underneath routes that these quarterbacks are able to exploit against us and get the ball out really quickly, and that was another problem in the preseason. And then, you can look at the individual failings like Levi, Feely missing a kick, and all the little things like that. But the real thing there, I think, is just not putting your players in a position to succeed. Because we knew going into it we couldn't match up with Jared Cook. We knew that Levi Brown was going to struggle on the outside, and surprise, surprise, all those things came to fruition, and they all happened. We struggled in both of those areas. So I think adjustments just needed to be made, and either they weren't or they weren't made quickly enough. I know Arians said he changed the play calling late in the game because of the struggles with pass protection. But, I guess the question there is that why you're throwing a we're out to a 6th-round pick on 3rd and critical, late in the 4th? Like, if it works, great, you're a genius, but it's a real football, we're out of the preseason. We have better weapons than Andre Ellington, so I don't know.
I've kind of had this discussion a little bit, and I'm going to play counterpoint to that. Is there not, if this were a season ago, who was probably our best guy outside of our receivers, our best guy that we had to make plays in the field happened to be Lerod Stevens-Howley. We've seen that a couple of times. When I saw that wheel play, I didn't kill it at all. I was disappointed that it didn't happen because from what I saw is that the throw was there, the play was there. Ellington didn't track the ball. He didn't look over he looked over the wrong shoulder, and so I don't kill the play calling there. In fact, play calling is going to get anytime a play doesn't work, play calling gets second guessed. And so when you look at the running game, on the game they'd only averaged 3 yards a carry, and in that particular time, the way that play happened. Now Palmer took the blame on that call. He said he didn't put it quite where he's supposed to. But if Ellington tracks that ball and hauls it in, he probably runs for a touchdown. No one complains about the play call. Execution comes down to that. I kind of liked the play, and we know about Bruce Arians. We use the quote to kick off the podcast. What is that? No risk it, no biscuit. That's one of those plays that if it's there, it's not a bad thing, and I don't have a problem with that. And we are on the side of Revenge the Birds. We have several active community members, active readers that are all about the coaches. Some more of the players. I fall more on the player side. Coach's job to scheme, and this player job's to execute. Now, you can say that the players were not put in the right position to do that. But on a play like that, you got to execute. Arians' play calling at the end of the first half gets the team in the field goal range as the players execute it. Jay Feely misses the 50-yard field goal. No, 50-yarders, no gimme. But when your one job is to kick, and those are the pressure kicks you got to make, especially in a close game. What was most to blame? That one's hard for me. And I'm going to kind of harp on a little bit the defense, and I don't know so much of the scheme as it was. They played a really good game overall. I mean, they did not do to Sam Bradford what they did in the first time. I mean, one of the games against Sam Bradford, he went 7 for 21. And except for a couple of big plays down the field, they were neutralized. Sam Bradford pretty much threw the ball where he wanted to, 27 to 38, 299 yards, had the pair of touchdowns, had the pick, which Dan Williams turned into 6 points. I see, probably if I had to pick one thing to blame, there's lots of things that happened, but I have to pick one thing to blame. It's the fact that it's a new coaching staff and that it is still adjusting things. The week 1 loss to me looked just like 2011. I'm going to get your guys' take on that, but it looked just like 2011 when you had Cobb in there and Horton that's new. And you look at those losses against the Giants where they had a lead late and it fizzled away. They had a lead in Washington and the lead got away. At the beginning of that season, before things kind of derailed and then got back on track, you can look at that and say, this looks really familiar. And it was simply because of the lack of the continuity. Now, you guys tell me, did you think at all that this was anything like 2011? When it happened, I was like, this is just like what happened with Kevin Cobb at the beginning of the year.
You know, I didn't at the time, but it kind of, now that you mention it, yeah, a little bit. I mean, at the end of the game, you know, they had the ball in the fourth quarter with 3 minutes to go. The game is tied up. You know, that's exactly what you want. The game is in your hands, and they couldn't get it done. And I think a lot of that has to do with it just being new coaching, new team, just new everything, and they just haven't congealed quite yet.
What about you, Seth? Is there anything that gives you the same feeling that I got? Or am I kind of like, maybe I'm just living in the past of like, wait, that could have happened?
No, I mean, there are some similarities. I guess the main difference would be that in 2011, even in the beginning, the Cardinals were getting pressure, constant pressure on defense, and so that would be the one difference. As you said, there were some hurries involved in what they did, but in Ray Horton's scheme, I think the difference was Ray Horton's scheme was giving up big plays out of aggression, whereas Todd Bowles' scheme thus far has given up big plays out of just how the scheme works. And it's the same thing, but it's different. There's not an aggression to Bowles' defense about how he calls the game, it looked like. They blitzed a lot, but they weren't getting beat by those blitzes, where in Ray Horton's defense that year, they were getting beat by blitzes. So, I get where you're coming from, but that'd be the one difference, is that there wasn't that constant pressure still that was being wreaked by the Cardinals that they had early in that season.
Yeah, you definitely got that with one of the things that Horton. Now, I know one of the things that in that first part of the season in 2011 that the defense struggled with is their assignments in the secondary, and they had a lot of big plays because of blown assignments out there. Well, at least with Cook, it appears that the play out there was not so much a blown assignment as is just a poor matchup where someone didn't screw up the assignment. It's just that's how it ended up being. Now, there's been a lot of people. Now, and by the way, those of you who happen to be listening tonight, we're Revenge of the Birds Radio. You can contact us if you wish to talk, get on the line and give us your thoughts, ask us some questions. You can give us a call at 646-478-3787. And you can ask me, you can ask Seth, you can ask Ben any question that you'd like about the game. Just give your initial reactions to the game, because it kind of felt after a preseason full of positivity, optimism, and Kool-Aid drinking, as we've been talking on the site, that everything happened and the world is over. The Cardinals are going to lose 13 games, and it's one game. It's one game. But one guy that's been getting killed is Levi Brown, and reasonably so. With the gives him 3 sacks to Quinn. He had the penalty. He gave a couple more pressures. But how concerned are you guys? How concerned are you guys after one game? And as you guys know, me, I'm much more on the positive side of things. And while that was a tough loss, there were so many good things that we saw. We saw Tyrann Mathieu doing exactly what Tyrann Mathieu was expected to do, making plays on the ball. He knocks away a touchdown. Carlos Danzy picks it up. We saw a tipped pass. Dan Williams picked up. So they created turnovers. They didn't get to the passer. They moved the ball offensively. They moved the chains. Except for, again, late in the game when they needed a key drive, they weren't able to get that. Defensively, they didn't get that stop, that one stop that they needed late in the game. Or more importantly, they couldn't get off the field in that long sustained drive that they had. Moving forward, I think I know what you're going to say, Seth. What is your biggest concern just after 1 week, pulling back to say, we're not saying the world is over. We're not saying the Cardinals are going to go to the Super Bowl. We're somewhere in between, because half the league's 0-1 and half the league's 1-0. But what are the major concerns that you guys have that could haunt the team in the weeks to come? I think I know where you're going, Seth. So hold your thoughts. Go with Ben. What is your biggest concern?
I'm gonna start with a quote. It was posted on Revenge of the Birds by KDean75, and it was written by Ben Muth, who writes for FootballOutsiders.com. And he had to say after the game that Levi Brown is so terrible that I just cannot talk about him anymore. The lunacy of people saying that getting him back after missing all last year with an injury would improve their offensive line would be funny if it wasn't so depressing. Bruce Arians calling him elite in the offseason is still incomprehensible. Arians had either never seen Brown play, is a complete buffoon, or a liar. There is no other option. And that pretty much sums it up for me. I had a lot of fun watching the game. Kind of like you said, Jess, it was fun watching the offense move the ball. They're converting on third downs. Matthew's out there making plays. It was really refreshing. It was a lot of fun to watch. But then as I was thinking about the game afterwards, I just hit on a lot of the same ideas that Muff pointed out in his take on the game, and I got frustrated and I got mad at it that we're still having this conversation as Cardinals fans. I'm still kind of mad about it, but you look at it and the Cardinals gave up, according to Pro Football Focus, they gave up 8 hurries, 3 hits, and 5 sacks, and that's despite what it looked like, that was not all on one guy. So we see the offense out there moving even with that, and we have, it looks like we finally have a QB who can play. I mean, after one game, I'm ready to say let's let Palmer retire as a Cardinal and, finish out his career here, because it was a good game for him, I thought. But my big concern is how long are we going to have him this season? If they don't fix the protection, it's not going to be that long before Ryan Lindley's starting the games, and then we're going to have trouble.
Okay, Levi Brown. Okay, Seth, I know what you're going to say. Is it the pass rush?
It's pass rush, but more than just a pass rush, and this is something that after I went back and looked at kind of my play charts from the game and then confirmed with Pro Football Focus on their snap counts and things like that, and it's something I just have been, I tweeted it out yesterday, or maybe it was, I can't remember, but my biggest concern is the lack of development from the last 3 draft classes. And that's really what my concern is, because that means that you're counting on to be key figures. I know Jonathan Cooper is injured. I know Rob Hausler is injured, but for instance, the 2013 class had only played 51 snaps on their defense. I'm not going to count special teams in this instance right now, but they only played 50 snaps on offense and defense, 39 of which were from Tyrann Mathieu. On offense, they only got contributions on 8 snaps from Andre Ellington and 4 snaps from D.C. Jefferson, and that's really not good for a team that drafted 7th overall, and then to only get a real contribution from your 3rd rounder. And again, but they had that pick in the 2nd round this year. That's concerning. Then you look at last year. Michael Floyd's already shown that he's going to be better, but Jamel Fleming and Bobby Massey are both inactive. They're not even, dressing out. Sure, they're on the roster, but they're not even dressing out at this point. That's a concern. And then, of course, you have injury proneness of the 2011 draft. Patrick Peterson, you have Ryan Williams, Rob Hausler, who every season, Williams has had season-ending injuries and Hausler has missed significant time. It's a concern because that means that there's not any young talent developing. It means that that we know what we have in every player, and that's kind of what was said earlier about Levi Brown. Levi Brown is what he is. He's never going to change. He's not going to bet overnight. I know Coach Arians talked a lot about hand placement, technique, and things like that. He's in his 7th year in the league. If he doesn't know that stuff by now, I have a hard time believing that it's just going to click all at once and he's going to start doing that stuff. But that, you look at it, you have Acho, who really hasn't developed much as a pass rusher. You have Okafor, who was a DNP coach's decision. It's just a concerning thing when you're not developing young talent, because like I said, that means that the talent that's there is who is going to be making the impact, and that's what my biggest concern is actually moving forward, to see if they not just play talent but develop talent at this point.
Interesting point that you bring up is that of the rookie class, in particular the most recent one, as Ken Wisenhunt was the one that got pretty much killed by our fans for the fact that he seemed to be dead set on not starting rookies. And it wasn't that he was dead set on not starting rookies, but rather he expected them to be competent in what they were doing and to be placed in a position where, one, they earned the position over the players, to be better than the players ahead of them, and put them in a situation where they're going to succeed, because if they haven't learned the system, if they're unfamiliar with things, they don't really want them out there. And yes, he played some rookies, and yes, he tended to ease them in later in the year. Then we have Bruce Arians, a self-proclaimed guy who likes to play the young guys, and you just said, yes, Cooper's out, so he would have played all 71 of those snaps, all 70 plays. But it's only Matthew that gets any significant time. Stephon Taylor doesn't get any time. Okafor's inactive. Watford's inactive. Ellington gets his 8 snaps. D.C. Jefferson gets his 4 snaps. Minter doesn't get in on defense. So I'm going to put this out there. Aside from the talk, is Bruce Arians much different than Ken Wisenhunt? And I've said this before. He's not. He talks. He gives better quotes. And I'm not going to kill him for that, because Ken Wisenhunt was a very good football coach here. Brought the team to some heights that we'd never seen before. He is a good football coach. Some of the fans are talking about how honest he is at his press conference. Wait, did we not just go through in the preseason one of the first things out of Bruce Arians' mouth after Darren College got hurt? Well, it was fortunate. I don't remember the exact quote. Fortunately for us, it's not a fracture.
It's a nerve issue, but it could have been worse. We only to find out 2 weeks later what happened. Exactly that. College has a fracture in his leg. He talks about, you get Ryan Williams, get the feeling that he might be playing. But at the beginning, I always felt he kind of had a pass. He just showed something and he'd be on the roster. Then he's listed as second on the depth chart, but then he's not inactive, and then he's not playing. It's kind of an interesting thing that we see here. He said he's going to play as young guys. If he didn't play as young guys, it's an interesting dynamic there. Biggest concern for me, I don't have any concerns about Arians. He's going to be what he's going to be. He's going to make some play calls, and guys that I know who have followed around him in Pittsburgh and Indy, well, particularly in Pittsburgh, he's going to call a great game, and then there's going to be a few plays you're just going to scratch your head. What in the world was he thinking? Why did he call that play? Offensive line play, and honestly, I'm not as worried about Levi Brown because, well, yes, he did get killed in that game. In this next game, he's not going to be facing an elite edge rusher that he faced. He's not going to have that issue. He's not going to have. There are some guys he's going to really struggle with matchups, and other games he's going to look all right. And because honestly, I can't complain too much about that other than the fact that we don't have anyone better at left tackle. My concern is, how long will it take for the defense to come around? How long will it take for them to look like the defense they're supposed to be? And if the defense looks like is that's how it's supposed to look like, how it looked on Sunday, there's some positives that came from that, but there's also some concerns. You don't want to give up a end of the third, beginning of the fourth quarter drive that eats up a lot of time, where they go 8 plays, 80 yards down the field, in which they didn't even get to third down. Because they've been good on third down, 36%, but they didn't even get St. Louis to third down on that drive. And so my concern is, how long is it going to? Is the defense does it look like the way it should, or how long will it take? And this is why I think I expected the team to start a little bit slowly. Levi Brown's been a big cup of conversation, obviously, after his play on Sunday. He looked good. I mean, he looked as good as he could look. The first couple preseason games didn't allow pressure. He did have a penalty in each of those. Then he got eaten alive against San Diego. Then Robert Quinn. Arians used the opposite. He talked about elite. Then when asked, he basically said those are guys. He's like, it wasn't exactly a vote of confidence by any means, but who are going to switch if he considers switching, making a change to left tackle, to who? Obviously, what you get from that, Nate Potter is not a guy he has confidence in. What do you do with Levi? Do we keep him out there? Do we put Potter out there? Do we go with Bradley Soul, who apparently, according to the depth chart, has now moved from right tackle to left tackle, but as we learned last week, the depth chart really doesn't mean much if Ryan Williams was number 2 on the depth chart and was inactive. Bradley Soul, when he first came in, was behind Levi at left tackle. Last week he was behind Winston and Massey at right tackle. And according to this week, he is back at left tackle. Seth, what do you think? What do we do with Levi? Do we have to leave him out there? Do we have to give him extra help in stubborn play calling and playmaking down the field? Is he a guy that we're just not going to see next year? Is Soul the answer? Is Potter the answer? People have suggested moving Massey or Winston to left tackle. What do you do?
Well, I think you said you were there in the offseason when they tried Massey at left tackle. I think it was for like 3 or 4 plays in OTAs. I don't remember if you were there or not, but that, it lasted 3 or 4 plays. I mean, it didn't even go on all OTAs or any of the time at camp. It went on for 3 or 4 plays.
It was 2 days. It was at FanFest.
Okay.
It was at FanFest. He and Potter were alternating between first team right tackle and second team left tackle, and then like the next day in practice, It was the last practice of OTA, and he was working all practice second team left tackle. That was it. It was basically a day and a half.
Yeah, so, I mean, they obviously saw something there that said this guy cannot play left tackle. Now, to be worse, that much worse than Levi Brown is, obviously saying something. And, I get killed at least for a lot, saying, why doesn't the team do this? Why don't the Cardinals do this or this in different instances? And I find that interesting that, then on the flip side, there's a lot of questions of, well, why isn't this guy playing left tackle? Why isn't this guy? I honestly think that if there was a better option at left tackle, they would put that person out there. And I just don't think there is one. Bradley Soule is a intriguing prospect that didn't play extremely well when on the edge in Indianapolis. And when he played inside against Indianapolis, he did play fairly okay in his one game. But he doesn't really know the protections. He doesn't know teams. I mean, I know he was in last year with Arians, so there is some comfort there. But and then Potter, if Levi's giving up 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles in a game, you would hope that coach would think, well, I'm going to go to this guy. If he had faith in Potter, he didn't or doesn't or whatever. So unfortunately, it's going to be Levi, and there it's how does Arians work it? One of the things that you talked about talking with Steelers guys that followed Arians. So one of the things when I talked to a couple of Steelers fans and even casual football fans last year with following Andrew Luck, they all basically screamed that Arians is more concerned, and not in a bad way, but is more concerned with his system implementing his plan and his plan than about the protection. He doesn't want to sacrifice route options for quarterback protection. That's something he did in Pittsburgh. That's something he did in Cleveland before that, and that's something that he did last year in Indianapolis. So it's just, he may do it more during the middle of the game, or at the end of the game if there's a lead in the future, but it's not something that he's going to do on a consistent basis, at least not yet, because that's just not his style. That's not how he does things. So I think we're stuck with Levi barring an injury, and I don't, ever wish injury on anybody. So you just, at this point, hope that things improve, that he gets into his sets a little better, that he's not playing, he's not reaching and whiffing on guys as often. But there were times in the game where he did out of by the time the defensive end was by him. So it's just going to be a war of attrition, and I kind of said that for a while on the running game, and it might be the same thing in the passing game is going to look really good, but it's also going to have its really bad moments, and that's because of protection. So, and as much as Levi, I did find it interesting that I had, after I went back and rewatched the game and kind of put everything back into focus, I had the Cardinals as a team giving up, outside of Levi, that is, I had the Cardinals as a team giving up an additional 10 quarterback pressures. So, and that's sack, hit, whatever. or a hurry. So, and that's so who's to say even if Levi held and won at that point that another player wasn't going to get there. So we can rip Levi because he gave up 6, but the Cardinals gave up 4 as a team and a lot of additional pressures as a team, and they none of them outside of Darren College were excellent in pass protection. So.
What's your take, Ben? What direction do you go with Levi? Do you look outside? Do you look inside? Do you think he's going to be here past the season? And can you say that this isn't going to be the same thing every week, or if this is just the outlier of the weeks to come?
Levi Brown, he's our Mark Sanchez. I really think so. How can he be so bad for so long and still have a job? Why did they give him another contract? It's just baffling. The thing that's upsetting to me is that he's gotten all of these free passes every year, and he got another one this year. I mean, they really didn't do that much to give him competition. I know they kept Potter around, but he obviously didn't push him at all in camp, and because of that, there really isn't anything the team can do at this point. I mean, going into Detroit, I think you have to surgically attach a tight end to his hip, because he just needs that much help over there. We've seen enough of him to know he's going to continue to struggle. But because we just don't really have the depth, you have to give him at least a couple more weeks. I think you give him a lot of help, you put him on a short leash, and you hope that I don't know. I guess the offense can continue to work even with him out there. If he doesn't improve, you have no choice but to try Soul on the outside. Maybe you try Potter. Honestly, if he doesn't improve, you try anybody over there that isn't currently starting at another position on the line, I think. It goes without saying we're going to be watching Levi's play, whether it's the coaches, whether it's the press, the fans, whether it's defensive ends on whatever team we're playing next. Everybody's going to be watching Levi, so there's obviously a lot of pressure there, and they have to do something. But Wisenhunt was here for 5 years, and he never figured it out, So we'll see what Arians comes up with and how long it takes him to come up with a plan that actually works.
Well, if I could piggyback off that real quick, it kind of hits on the point that I brought up, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago in an article when Cooper went down, that this isn't my and Arian's fault. Now, like Ben said, he's continually to get trashed and then keep trying. You start to point the finger at Aaron for not making a move. But this goes back to the fact that they haven't addressed the offensive line outside of this year, really in the draft. Since before that, Levi. So there's not a ton of talent just out on the bench, that can fill in or jump in, push people. There's 6th and 7th round picks. You look at what Alphanica is. He was the talk of training camp, and he's just kind of after that first game where he filled in for Levi or Darren, he's just kind of been a body in the middle of the field. It's not came in, and as much as people don't, and Arians included, don't want to, this was a rebuild, because when you change over and you have so many holes and needs to address, get missed. They had to shore up the interior of the offensive line. They did that, work out because of an injury. Then they had to, their next step was to get better on protection. They thought that Winston, it's 1 week, we don't know, but it wasn't great this week. And on the other side, they had a pass rush, and they brought in John Abraham, drafted Alex Okafor. But again, they haven't invested anything in protecting the quarterback on the edge or getting to the quarterback on the edge. And that's not their fault. They had so many other things that they had to do in the mess they had to clean up, that it's going to take time to get through the muck that was that era to get into new. And you just hope that Arians is around long enough to see it through. That's what it boils down to, is get before they can say we're talented at every position.
I'm going to ask a question then. Based on since nothing happened, one thing we know: left tackles don't grow on trees. Arians, another one of his very quotable things, he said that God makes left tackles. That there's something special about him. In that same conversation, he mentioned Levi Brown. God makes him. Now, the guys that were available: Jake Long, St. Louis, and Brandon Albert was purportedly available from Kansas City, who didn't end up going anywhere. Should the Cardinals, in your guys' opinion, have made a move for one of those guys? Obviously, Jake Long, pricey. And there definitely were concerns about injuries, and then he left the game at one point because of an injury, I believe. But there's definitely concerns, when I was talking to the Rams guys last week, that if he can't stay healthy, which would you rather have? So would you, if you were Steve Keim, would you have made a move for either Albert or Long or someone on a lesser level, maybe Max Starks, who came available late in the preseason? Would you guys have done that? What would you have done, Ben?
Oh yeah, absolutely, definitely. I don't know how many of you actually paid attention to this during the off season, but there's the SB Nation runs a 32-team mock draft, and this year they included off-season trades and everything. And yeah, when I was representing the Cardinals, I traded for a tackle, I drafted one. I definitely would have. My entire hope for the off-season was that they would just tear that position apart, and then they really didn't do anything at all to address it.
Seth, would you have gone after a guy like Albert or Long?
If I really would have liked Albert if you go up second, and that's not a shot at Kevin Minter, because I think he's going to be an excellent player. But if you're giving me the option of a rookie sitting on and learning to play the inside linebacker position, or probably top 10, top 12 left tackle in the league, I'm going to take left tackle. Just investment. The other thing was intriguing on the market that got no play here in Arizona was actually a guy out of New Orleans and now in Chicago, and they gave up a sack yesterday or on Sunday against a very good defensive line in Cincinnati, and that was Jermon Bushrod. I think they paid $35 million for him, and so that was another run to had. I wouldn't have gone after Long. Injuries were much for me. Albert, for a second, which is what I believe they wanted, I would have done. And Jermon Robb, you could have gotten him. I think they got him for $5 million. If you can get him for $7 million, I think that would have been a nice pickup as well.
Okay.
And I think going into the draft, wasn't Eric Winston a late signing too? So going into the draft, we really only had the 3 tackles anyway. I mean, it was definitely a concern then, and it still is, obviously.
Yes, that is true. Winston was added right at the beginning of training camp, and so they had kind of planned on going in with Levi and Bobby and Nate and Potter. So you could tell that they thought that they were confident the position that they had, but once the workouts came in the off season and for some reason, after getting lots of talking up, Potter kind of fell out of graces, but at some point in the preseason, and Massey as well, who physically was having a good camp, who's doing everything right that way, but just was having too many mental mistakes. You guys are going to listen to Revenge of the Birds Radio. This is your host, Jess Root. I'm here with Ben and Seth as we're talking Arizona Cardinals football on the few days after that their season opening loss to the St. Louis Rams. If you want to call in and give your thoughts, give us a call at 646-478-3787. Again, 646-478-3787.
And as we move on, we talk about Levi Brown, another guy that has gotten a little bit of a lot of criticism, especially since the preseason and on and off in his years even since 2011, is kicker Jay Feely. If you want to point to one play that we wish you could have back, it would probably be the points that were left on the field. In this case, the 50-yard miss by Jay Feely at the end of the first half. If he makes that kick, the entire setting is different, because instead of that kick by Zerline being for overtime, it was for the win, or it puts them in a situation that they would rather go for the win rather than going for the tie, which they probably would have been the same result. But Josh Weinfuss, who was employed by the Cardinals up until last week when he joined ESPN, he tweeted out before the game of Feely looked like he was struggling. He was not kicking the ball out well. He wasn't just kicking the ball. He missed a few of the field goals for practice. He wasn't kicking the ball deep, and he kind of got picked on by Arians as he got picked on during camp. It was very, very obvious to me that Feely isn't Arians' guy. Arians would much rather have a different kicker. But kind of what they said, his quote was yesterday, we looked at the best guy out there, which was Dan Carpenter, and he lasted, 3-4 days, and it didn't make an impact. So clearly, Feely was the best, according to the people they have on staff, is that he's better than the guys that they have out on the outside, and they're just going to ride it. Now, we've seen Feely do this before. He will have some hiccups. He'll have a little struggle. In 2011 was the beginning of the year when he missed those kicks against Seattle, and then went on to have a great year. Last year he booms that 61-yarder. Then the potential winning kick against Buffalo tipped. Then he misses another kick the next week, and then after that he has a fine year. How long does he have? Do you guys see him getting replaced at some point this year? Because kickers tend to get cut at some point. They miss a kick, team cuts him, and another team picks him up. How long? Let's go over under. Is it going to be by the bye week, or are we going to see him after the bye week as the kicker for the Cardinals? Yes, he's owed him $1.5 million this year, but would you guys predict that he's not going to be the Cardinals kicker before the end of the year? What would you say, Seth?
I just don't know who else is out there, to be honest with you. I follow along a lot of different things, but kickers aren't necessarily one of them. So, I'd have to pay a lot of attention as the year's going along to be comfortable saying that he wouldn't be. It's hard though, because more concerning to me than a 50-yard field goal miss is the fact that he struggles so badly on kickoffs, and that can come back to bite the Cardinals eventually. It's not like it was Javier Arenas catching the ball 9 yards deep in the end zone and bringing it out, and the Rams got the field position they did. It was Feely. I know he slipped once, but he just couldn't get the ball in the end zone, and that was a problem 2 years ago. Last year, he must have used a lot of deer antler spray on his legs before the games. I don't know, because it wasn't a problem, but it seems to be a problem again this year. That's more of a concern to me. 50-yard field goals, you'd like to think that your kicker is going to make them, but I think it's only like I read it somewhere, and I don't have it offhand. I can't remember, but I think it's like a 75 or 73% probability that you're going to make anything over 50 yards. So, that may be his next 4 he makes, and he's right in or his next 3 he makes, and he's right in that, that percentage. So, I would say no, unless his struggles on kickoffs continue.
Okay, Ben, do you think he'll be the kicker through all 17 weeks of this season?
Well, we know he's streaky, and he's been a cold starter the last couple of years. I think all of his misses in 2012, and I think except for one in 2011 came in the first half of the season, and then he really put it together and had pretty good years both of those seasons. So I don't know. If you're not happy with your kicker and his salary is guaranteed, if he's on the roster in week 1, you should have made a change before week 1. You know, like I'd say they're probably stuck with him now. They're not going to pay 2 kickers, especially when the first one's earning $1.5 million, you know, unless he's really, really bad. The misses are maddening, but kickers do miss, especially from 50 yards or more, you know. So he has enough of a pedigree that you have to think he'll be able to put it together and have a decent season. Since they haven't replaced him yet, it's obviously going to come down to a cut from another team for them to make a move at this point. So yeah, I think he'll probably be on the roster at the end of the season.
And I would imagine that would be my prediction as well, unless there's a fairly high profile cut. If somebody gets cut, someone decent, one of those kickers like a guy like a Nick Folk or David Akers, and not necessarily those guys in particular, a name that's had some success before, I would totally see the Cardinals bringing him in. I mean, obviously Will Batson wasn't the guy to push Feely, because Feely spent most of the time. It wasn't until they brought in Carpenter that Feely started actually getting serious about his work. And Feely's a good guy. He really is a great teammate. He's a good kicker. But you get the sense that there's something that the coaching staff he's not their guy, and so they're looking for really any reason to bring someone that they can count on more.
But to go into that one more time though, Jess, is, you know, again, they were unfortunately stuck with him at that point. You know, it's hard to fault them for saying, well, we can't put, you know, $2 million into the special teams kicking, just one special teams position in kicking, because I think Feely's contract was fully guaranteed, or most of it was guaranteed anyways. So, you know, it came down to the point of you have to pick where you want to spend your money at that point. And you know, Arians, that is one thing Arians does, just like Wisenhunt. He doesn't hide his disdain for players, his own players. So, you know, much like the way Wiz felt about Darnell Dockett towards the end, I think we're going to see a lot of that this year with Arians and Feely before, you know, and I think he makes it through a year and then they let him go. But sorry, go ahead, Jess.
No, that's fine. Interesting comments you make about that, because something I ran across online that I didn't get a chance to post because he's a former Cardinal, but O'Brien Schofield, whether it's just sour grapes or whatever it was, he was on the air in Seattle on the radio, and he opened up about the situation here in Arizona, that he could tell the writing was on the wall when he first came to off-season workouts. And the new coaching staff had him working with the rookies. And the second that they signed Lorenzo Alexander, where was Lorenzo Alexander, who's never been a starter, mind you, never been a starter on defense. And he was put immediately in Schofield's spot on defense. Schofield kind of was pushed out of the way. For whatever reason, they did not like what they had on tape. And as soon as they had a guy in Abraham kind of ready to go, they drafted a guy. They drafted Okafor. They already had Osho. They drafted Okafor, signed Alexander, and then they brought in Abraham. That was clearly, but he could tell. What he talked about was kind of like that he was not treated like a veteran player, that he kind of knew he was in the doghouse already, which is interesting perspective because of how fans view Arians opposed to Wisenhunt. And just my personal view, as much as I enjoy Arians and I respect it, I thought he was the best guy. Obviously, he was a great hire. Guess what? He's not a whole lot different than any other football coach. While he'll be really harsh with players, he'll be really loving with players, but in the end of the day, he's a football coach, and he's an older football coach, so he's going to be like other football coaches. The guys that he doesn't have faith in, he's not going to sugarcoat it, and we didn't see any of that, but just body language and the ways things like that, just the way he talks about Feely, another guy that it was Schofield. I mean, he gave him a glowing thing. He was a talented guy, but you can tell in the off season where they were going with some players, and it'll be interesting to see what happens over the course of the season as well. Enough of what happened before, as we can look forward. Now let's look ahead to this Sunday's matchup against the Lions. What are you guys looking most forward to? What are you looking for on the positive side, and then on the worry side as you face a Lions team that came away with a 34 points on the scoreboard against Minnesota? They won last week. However, this is the same Lions squad that the Cardinals did beat last year. Their one victory outside of their first four. Yes, they've got Stafford. Yes, they've got Calvin Johnson. Now they add Reggie Bush to the mix. What are you looking forward to on a positive note? What do you expect? What do you want? Can't wait to see. And then what are you concerned about going into the week with the particular matchups with the Lions? And we'll go with you, Ben.
Well, before we move on to the Lions, I think there's another special teamer on the Cardinals that deserves special mention, and that would be Javier Arenas. He didn't see a single snap. He didn't see a single snap on the team on defense, and he was just awful as a kick returner. And he's been doing that for 4 years. To bring one of those kicks out from his own 8 inside his end zone was just appalling, I thought. But then to do it again I was just incredulous. And I think the fact he also coughed up the ball on one of those returns, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yeah, they recovered.
I could confirm that. I don't remember.
But they recovered it. But yeah, he fumbled.
Yeah, that was just, oh man, that was tough to watch. And the fact that he's not playing on defense, we have 2 other corners on the roster that aren't taking snaps on defense. So it's just an idea I was kind of tossing around earlier. I mean, would it make sense to just dump him and bring in an actual return specialist, since that's really all he's doing anyway?
And that's actually interesting, because I don't think they would need to bring in another guy to be return specialist, since they've already got Stephon Taylor, Alfonso Smith, Andre Ellington, who really couldn't handle the kickoff return. And the other guy, Jamel Fleming, interestingly enough, he's another guy that's kind of on that. It's kind of the scratch your head. What's up? He clearly is not in the team's plans, and except that when I talk to him, he's a starter on special teams, yet he's inactive for the game. So that's another guy you're like, there's talent there, but clearly that the coaching staff doesn't see that. And Javier Arenas, he seems to be a guy that you really don't need. I mean, they've already got one guy in Cason who doesn't play hardly on defense. He got 5 snaps. They really only go with the 3 corners, and unless somebody gets hurt, they're not going to see much more time than that. You're going to see Cason. I mean, you're going to see Powers. You're going to see Peterson. You're going to see Matthew is the nickel guy, and then Cason who could come in, who got 5 snaps. Arenas you might not ever see, and then you still have Bethel, and you've got Fleming. They have an overabundance of corners, truly.
Absolutely,
yeah, definitely. So looking ahead to the Lions, I guess. Oh, no, sorry, Seth, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and one of the things is, I think if it was just interesting that they wouldn't cut bait on Arenas out of camp to have a guy like Fleming get playing time or be active at least during the game. When, it's not like they gave up anything. It's not like they were going to use Anthony Sherman. So why not, why not just cut bait if he wasn't doing what you need him to do? But yeah, that's an excellent point, Ben.
So looking forward to the Lions. Again, this is Revenge of the Birds Radio. You can give us a call at 646-478-3787 if you want to call in and give your take. But we're going to be talking about the Lions. And Ben, what are you looking forward to on the positive side and on the concern side when you look ahead at the Lions?
Well, with Ndamukong Suh coming to town, I'm very concerned about Palmer having his throat stomped on, both literally and figuratively. I think this is one week where we're definitely going to miss Jonathan Cooper, because college and Sunline always struggle against those kind of guys. They're just going to be outmatched, and that's all there is to it. And those are the better interior linemen. We don't even really know what we have in Fanica yet. So I expect to see some Stephon Taylor this week, because you're going to want a back there next to Palmer that can actually pass block. You're probably going to want him back there just about every down. I think probably we're going to see a lot of delayed underneath routes, a lot of chip blocking, because obviously Levi's going to need a little bit of help on the edge, even if they don't have an elite exterior pass rusher other than maybe Ansa. one of the things we were worried about Jared Cook going into the Rams game, but then looking at Detroit's game, Reggie Bush put up 190 all-purpose yards. I think he was over 100 yards receiving, and that's not even including Joey Bell. I think Bell alone had about 8 catches. So I think those guys are just going to have a field day catching passes in the middle of our defense because we really just don't have an answer for underneath routes. We don't, just the quick reads, we really haven't been able to stop at all. Our linebackers and safeties have really struggled to pick them up in coverage, and I think we're going to see a big day from Bush and Bell. If you have those guys in fantasy and you're in a PPR league, definitely, you're probably definitely going to want to play them.
Your turn, Seth.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm concerned with is going to be the same thing all season. That's, can stop the opposing pass rush? And as Ben said, can they stop the underneath routes? One of the things that, and not to, and I'm going to, I don't want to spoil too much of it, but there is an elite pass rush on that defense that's not from the year, and his name's Willie Young, and he had a fantastic game against Matt Khalil, of all people, who, most Cardinals fans would have traded, every pick in last year's draft. And he's and Willie Young had a really, really dominant performance. So that is still going to be concerned because he's going to line up over Levi, and he's going to have the chance just to, pin his ears and go. And then they'll bring in Ansah as, another guy. So, it's not actually, it's not Lever Woods just yet for Levi.
I completely forgot about Ziggy. That will be interesting to see because if there's one thing he's got, it's speed.
Yes, and between that and even looking further ahead, what Cameron Jordan, sorry, I always his names. Cameron Jordan of the did in week 1 and how dominant he was pass rush. It's going to be a long thing, but on the good, what I think we can see, I actually am going to go the opposite way of Ben. I think they're going to try to go deep more. I think they're going to force the Lions' pass rush to beat them because their coverage units aren't great. And so they're going to make those cornerbacks cover, our big, strong receivers in Larry Fitzgerald and Michael Floyd, and then they're going to look to get the under stuff and shorter Arians, shorter stuff, that 8 to 15 yard stuff to Andre Robertson. And you brought up Taylor. I wouldn't be surprised to see more of Andre. I know the wheel route didn't go as planned, but that may be something that they look. I know he doesn't like to throw the rush by design, but that's. I really think that they can take advantage and win down the field a lot if the offensive line can hold up. That's going to be the big thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think our receivers are probably going to should be able to have a pretty good day. It comes down to protecting Carson Palmer. I had forgotten about Willie Young too on their defensive line. The Lions are really set up to exploit the Cardinals' weaknesses that we were exposed in week 1. So it's going to be up to the coaches really to kind of make adjustments, I think, and try and recover from some of our holes.
And that is going to be a fun. If one thing that we didn't see last year was the offensive display, and it was mostly pathetic and miserable to watch. With the downfield push that Arians has, with the ability that Carson Palmer has, and the skill players that the Cardinals have, this could be one of those fun shootouts that we see, depending on how things go. And I'm going to be looking forward to see what kind of offensive production they can put up against a team that, in fact, does not have great coverage in their secondary. And that's kind of been their bugaboo, Detroit's bugaboo now for years, is they have the interior line, they have the line to do things, but they just don't have the coverage down the field. It's to match up with. So Matthew Stafford has to do what he did 2 seasons ago and put up yards after yards after yards. And I'm concerned with
if going into, again, I'm looking more at the defenses, that was still expected to be a strength of this unit. Are we going to see some issues? Are we going to see them give up all of those underneath and just kind of move down the field? We saw it last week in that one drive. We saw that against San Diego, where with the first unit, where Ken Wisenhunt and he was able to have Phillip Rivers just march down the field pretty much at will. And maybe they're going to go with that sort of defense where they're going to count on creating a turnover and then getting stout in the red zone and holding them to 3. But we're going to wait and see. Again, I just looked this up. Vegas doesn't know which way to go in this game. It opened at an even line. Right now, the lines hold a slight 1-point edge as sure as the money's been coming in. This is not a game that you can look at and say, another measuring stick of sorts for the Cardinals. You have the Rams, you're like, well, they might be, I don't know what to think about the Rams or the Cardinals. I don't know what to think about the Cardinals or the Lions still. It's the second week in a row where we kind of have that same kind of setup. Any predictions that you see moving forward for the game? Now, again, we're going to have our preview show on Thursday where I'm going to get Sean Ewell from Pride of Detroit, and we're going to have him as a guest talking about the matchup with the Lions on Thursday. However, for you guys, any predictions that you want to say, or any, not necessarily score, but something we're going to see on Sunday?
Well, I noticed that the Lions had 3 picks against the Vikings, and 2 of them were by the linebackers. And you're probably not often going to see your linebackers getting interceptions unless the QB is being pressured into stupid throws. And that was kind of one of the concerns with Palmer when he came over here, was that some of his turnovers were a little bit questionable. So, is the team going to be able to protect him and keep his head in the game and keep him upright and keep the ball moving? Both teams are definitely going to be able to score, I think. I don't know about at will, but I don't know if it'll be a shootout exactly, but it's definitely going to be, at least in the 20s, I think, for both teams. And then the Cardinals also got a little bit lucky against the Rams with turnovers. I think they fumbled like 4 times, and 2 of them went out of bounds and they recovered 2. So the Cardinals could really struggle with turnovers in this game, I think, if they can get to Palmer and if we just don't protect the ball well enough. So I'm kind of leaning towards the Lions in this one, although I hate to vote against the Cardinals, especially the idea of starting out 0-2. That would just not be good for the season. But
well, this is my prediction for the game. We're going to see a Patrick Peterson score on offense. I think that's going to happen this game, based on that coverage matchup. We're going to see Patrick Peterson make a big play on offense. He may not do it. It might be the only thing that happens is a big play. But I expect to see Patrick Peterson make an impact play, a scoring play of some sort this week. Seth, do you have anything that you got?
Well, I think it's going to be a shootout. Unlike that, it's going to get into the fourth, honestly. This is, and I'm not comparing the quarterback, but this is the 2009 Arizona Cardinals. This team really looks like that team to me. Questionable running game, possibly great receivers. Don't want to put this crop of receivers into what that group of receivers did, but possibly receiving core and a defense that can create turnover in plays, but to give up a lot of yards, a lot of scoring opportunities. So I really do think this, and this prediction, I'm still kind of deciding how high I want to go, honestly. I can see the Cardinals getting into the 35-40 point range. I honestly could. And the Lions will be right on their heels the entire game. So I think this is going to be an old-fashioned shootout. I think Palmer's going to put up massive numbers this week. If you have him in, a fantasy league, and I'm not a fantasy guy by any stretch of the imagination, but if you have him in a fantasy league, I think he's going to put up big numbers. I wouldn't be surprised to see, 4+ touchdown passes from Palmer this week. And, just hope that the Cardinals are on the right side of this one.
All right, so we've got massive scoring from Seth. We've got turnovers on the downside for Ben and myself. I think Patrick Peters is going to find the end zone in some fashion. We are at the end of our allotted time here for Revenge of the Birds Radio. Thank everyone for listening. I'd like to thank you, Seth, for being on again tonight, and you, Ben, as well. As your input is great. Your insights are welcome, and as always, thank you for listening. We will be back. I will be back on Thursday night to discuss with Sean Ewell from Pride of Detroit, as we'll get his perspective as we get some insight into the Cardinals' next opponent. But until then, have a great night. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Stitcher Radio. Of course, you can find us at revengeofthebirds.com. And good night, everybody.
Thanks, Jess. Have a good one.
You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting revengeofthebirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at revengeofbirds. You can also find us on iTunes at facebook.com/revengeofthebirds.